Welcome. My name is Ron Papa Schmidt, and welcome to the relaunch of the Net Zero Now YouTube channel. This is going to be video one, and what we're going to do here is we're going to have sort of one piece that we're going to create for the overall climate mosaic. And each one of these videos that I'm going to do now will hopefully add another piece to that mosaic, and over time, hopefully we'll have a very comprehensive understanding of what's really happening to Earth, our climate, and living conditions on our planet. So in this particular video, I want to really cover four things. Number one, I just want to do a quick background and talk about myself and my motivations for launching this channel. I've done that in some other videos. I thought since we're starting over again with a relaunch, I thought it may be an appropriate way to start. And then I'm going to do a little bit of history of the Net Zero Now YouTube channel, and then we're going to talk about some structural changes and upgrades we've made to the channel. And then lastly, I thought it'd be appropriate to sort of talk about, well, what's the research process? How do I go about creating these videos? So that's what we're going to try to cover here. So I thought we'd maybe start with, what's my personal background, okay? So from a training perspective, I was an MBA, CPA, and my career really focused on sort of managing complex accounting, finance, and information systems. From an institutional perspective, where did I work? Okay, I started out at Arthur Andersen and Company, then moved to First Wisconsin National Bank, and then I moved to Bank One, which eventually then merged with JPMorgan Chase, and I spent my last 27 years with that combination. Now, from a science perspective and a climate perspective, I have no formal education in that. But since I've become very concerned about this subject about 3 years ago or so, I've spent probably 4,000 hours, I would guess by now, sort of really doing sort of intense research, trying to understand what's going on, and trying to do that in a way that I can communicate that to people like yourself. And so that's what I've been focused on for the last 3 years. They say you have to have 10,000 hours to be an expert in something. So I'm now up to 4,000. So these are a little bit better than what I did 2 years ago. But so we're making progress on that journey. And I welcome you to join us on that journey as we move forward here. So why am I doing this? Okay. Well, one is I came to recognize that we have a climate crisis on our hands. So let me just talk for a second about that, how that happened, okay? It was my 80th birthday, and I decided for my 80th birthday, what I was going to do is, for the family, I thought what I would do is create a booklet and tell them, here are the 8 things I learned in life that I really want to pass on to you. And so I did that. It just so happened, close to my 80th birthday, I needed rotator cuff surgery. And so I normally have a fairly active life, playing golf, doing a whole bunch of things, and my activity level was severely restricted. So as soon as my 80th birthday was over, I was starting to get a little bit bored, okay? And then I happened to spend more time watching television. I happened to watch this author who came on who had a book called The Uninhabitable Earth. I said, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, so I got the book. I read it. I said, well, this is kind of scary, you know. And I'm in some discussion groups, and we meet weekly for a couple hours to talk about stuff. And so I said, yeah, I'm reading this really interesting book. Let's talk about that. So we scheduled 2 meetings to talk about that. And the first meeting, we had kind of an interesting conversation and stuff like that. To start a second meeting, after about 10 minutes, I just said, stop. We got to stop this. I said, this material is just not working. They said, what do you mean? We're having a great discussion. I said, yeah, we're having a great discussion and everybody's talking, but you have absorbed nothing, absolutely nothing from this material. You're saying the same things you said at the beginning of this session before we began looking at this stuff. And I said, I'm serious about this. This is really a serious problem, folks. So let me do this. This material ain't working. Let me see if I can create something So I can present this in a way that I think you can relate to. And since I had all my time in my head, that's what I did. So I got involved in that. And I eventually did do that. And so anyway, that's how I got into it. And then the other thing that happened every single day, every week, every month I spent on this thing, the more and more concerned I became. And the more I start to realize, oh, wait a minute here, nobody's talking about this. Even the scientists and the people who are concerned are just talking about it as if, yeah, we'll get the 1.5 by 2050 or something else like that and all these things. And I was like, folks, that ain't what's happening here. And so then I really got actively involved. Okay, so that's how I got started in this thing. Okay, some people call it an obsession. Could be true. So why am I doing this? The other reason, well, I'm one of these people. I've always believed that my responsibility on Earth here is to sort of leave this planet in life a little bit better than it was than when I got here. I think that's just and I think we sort of have a moral responsibility for that. So I've always believed that. And then religiously, it's like I happen to be a Christian, and so as I read the Bible. And I listen to what the Bible says, particularly in Genesis and everything. It just says that we are here on earth. God put us here to be stewards. We're supposed to take care of this earth, take care of fellow human beings, and other kinds of things. Our job is not to sit here passively and just observe what's going on and so that God's going to solve everything and we don't have to do anything. That's not the way this works. God has expectations that we're going to, that's what we're here for, is to basically make this a better place to live. We're supposed to be stewards of this. And so that additionally motivated me. So I both thought there was a crisis and it sort of met my moral requirements in terms of taking on, I think I have a responsibility to do something about this, okay? Then the other thing is we were just blessed. We talk about our family and things like that. We're just blessed. We had... late in life, we have two granddaughters. One happens to be right now, she just had her third birthday, and the other was very close to her second birthday. And they have just been a blessing. And one thing that I was watching this, and I'm looking at how much effort we're putting in as a family, and how much effort the parents are putting in trying to make sure that they're developing into healthy, well-rounded, respectful, God-fearing human beings. Okay, and it just that sort of is like the consumption of their time. I look at their friends who are over, and they have a bunch of friends with kids the same age, and they're all really just highly focused on that. And I'm looking at that, and I'm saying, do you understand that what the Klein scientists are telling you, by the time they get to be 25, we could be living in a nightmare scenario. So by the time they're maybe ready to get married and start their adult life, we're going to force them to try to do that in what climate science says is a nightmare scenario. And we're not going to try to do anything about that. I look at them and I see their eyes and I say, you don't understand. I've got to do something to try to make their life better. Now, the last thing is, I will tell you that this is an independent event, okay? I'm getting zero institutional support. I'm sort of just like a one-man band. Some people say it could be like Don Quixote, chasing windmills or something like that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm not getting any money to do this. I'm not looking for fame. I'm not doing this for personal gain. I'm doing this to try to solve a problem that I see for the world. And the other thing I want to say is that, I really have an old Mac computer here. I'm using one of their software products, Keynote. These are not fancy videos, as you can probably tell. I probably have a couple $100 invested in material here in terms of a camera and a microphone. And so you're going to find these videos aren't particularly slick or other kinds of things. But hopefully what you will find is that these videos are understandable, they're relatable, and they're telling you the truth, or the truth as I know it. So let's get to the next thing here in terms of the history. I already talked about this at 80. I read this book, and that got me going. By 81, after doing these discussions, I said, I'm going to do some presentations. So I did several presentations. Some of them were 3 sessions long for an hour and a half or 2 hours. Some Zoom sessions, the same kind of thing. And just a podcast with some local groups. But so I talked about this. But by the end of that period, that year, it occurred to me that this is, given the kinds of things I had, the information I had, and the kinds of things I wanted to convey, doing those kinds of presentations just wasn't a particularly effective vehicle. And what I really probably needed to do was to launch a YouTube channel. So I decided to go ahead and try to do that. And I used the moniker of Ron Papa Schmidt. And the reason for it is my granddaughters call me Papa. I don't know why, but they do, okay? And you can see a picture of me at I think this was the second birthday party for one of them, and we had a watermelon theme, and somebody gave them a purse, and I had this t-shirt with Papa on it, and they asked me to take a photo with the picture with the purse, so I did, But the reason I use Papa is let me tell you, doing this, the hours I'm spending and the things I'm doing, and this generally, I would not say people are pounding down the door to hear me talk about climate and say there's a crisis or anything else on their hands, okay? So this can be fairly depressing kind of work at times. You don't get a lot of positive feedback. And I use the word Papa all the time. So it sort of reminds me why I'm doing this, so I stay focused and I stay energetic in terms of trying to continue forward with this effort. Now, the other thing happened then, I think I had about 20 videos that I had published over about a 6 or 8 month period. And as I was trying to create my next level of videos talking about how Hurricane Melissa worked, and I wanted to do a video that talked about hunger and drought and other kinds of things and how those interplayed and some of the flooding things that are going. As I started to get into that, it occurred to me, really, I didn't have an adequate understanding of how Earth's climate systems really worked, at least enough of an understanding to articulately explain why these things were happening. So I decided I was going to so I stopped doing new videos and I started researching these subjects. And how I research subjects actually is once I pick the subject I'm going to do, I basically create a draft presentation. Because I find one way of learning something is trying to explain it to somebody else. So I would do that, and as I was creating these presentations, I'd learn more and then discover there's some other things I didn't learn, and just the process just seemed to go on, snowball, and go on and on and on. In fact, I think I ended up with 8 videos on 8 different topics talking about different high and low pressure systems, just to give you an example. But now I think I've got a good enough understanding that I'm ready to now come back and start talking about things. And so I basically decided to relaunch this channel, with some new tools and maybe some different ways I'm going about doing this. I've actually started to use artificial intelligence, and that's helped me a lot in terms of speeding up the process in which I can understand things. So let me talk now real quickly about the YouTube channel of Restructuring. One of the things we're doing is we're going to go with simple numbers. Okay, this is 1. The next video will be 2. After that, it'll be 3, etc. So in the previous thing when I started out, I had a very elaborate scheme involved in terms of trying to put all kinds of meaning into these numbers. And it just, the more videos I did, the quicker it sort of just blew apart, and it just became so confusing that it actually was becoming a hindrance. So I decided to just get rid of all of that. I'm just going to call them numbers now. And the other thing I did when I set this thing up, we had a number, I think I had 7 playlists or 9 playlists at one point in time. We're just going to cut all that down to just 3. So they're going to be, and we're creating playlists to help you get to particular subjects easier that you're interested in. So one of them is going to be the science. We're going to focus on, okay, how does the Earth's science, atmospheric systems, or really all of Earth's systems work? And we'll do that in science videos. And then the other ones, a set of playlists is going to be for videos that deal with the consequences. Okay, so if temperature is rising, what is the consequence of that? So if the consequences on hunger, if the consequences in drought, if the consequences in terms of hurricanes and other kinds of things like that, we'll talk, those kinds of videos will go into the consequence section. Then the other thing that's really important is pathways. How do we solve this problem? And so when we talk, I have videos about how to solve the problem. Those will go into the pathway section. But I will have to tell you, most of the earlier videos will be in the science section. And the reason for that is, in order to be able to understand the consequences, you need to sort of understand the science. And to understand whether the pathways are legitimate or not, you need to sort of understand the science. So most of them, the early videos, will be in the science category, and I will start doing videos in these other categories a little bit later. So next thing I'm going to do is I decided, so I've got all these videos out there that are all still generally pretty good. Okay, I feel fairly comfortable with the accuracy of what they're talking about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all those into a legacy playlist. And that will be there, so if you want to see some of the old videos, do that. And then as I replace that content with new videos, I'll unpublish the old content from the legacy playlist, and eventually they will go away. The other thing I've learned as I've sort of done this thing is that I really designed these videos to deal with looking at a YouTube on a big screen TV or on a monitor like I use, 27-inch monitors, and so there's a lot of dense material here, and that works out pretty good on these big screen devices. But the reality is, as I've sort of discovered, is that people are really looking at them on their smartphones and on tablets, and they don't work well in that environment. So I don't want to take away the richness of content on these devices, because my goal was, if I cover something quickly and you're so interested, you can maybe pause it and read what I'm saying there. But what I am going to do is I'm going to try to modify how I present this stuff so it works better or more friendly with smartphones and tablet kinds of screens. So hopefully I can do that successfully. It's not going to be created specifically for that, but I'll try to accommodate that to make it more user-friendly. And the other thing I've come to recognize is that my goal was always to create a shared community. But I'm finding that we have different realities in terms of how we get information. I mean, when I grew up, everybody watched the evening news, ABC, NBC, CBS, and I still do to this day. And research says, though, that for those networks, that I think the median age is 67 now. Younger generation, my kids and their kids, do not watch the national evening news on television, okay? And one thing I've noticed is that I see a lot of, right now, weather events are taking up 3 to 4 minutes sometimes, almost nightly on the newscast. They're talking about weather events that are happening in different parts of the country. And I'll mention that to people. I just get this blank stare. What are you talking? It's like, and so I think what I need to do here, if we're going to have a shared community and a shared reality, because that's the only way you can really solve this problem, is that I need to do a better job of trying to bridge the gap. I can't assume that everybody's watching the national news like I am can immediately relate to what I'm saying. They can't. And that's up to me to try to do a better job of that. So I'm going to try to do that in these videos also now. And then lastly, as we create more of these videos, it's become obvious we're going to need to create some kind of a matrix. It's going to make it easy for you to find the video you want to look at. And so we're going to try to do that, but we probably won't do that till we've got at least 10 or 15 videos out there. So we make sure when we do that matrix, we have something that's going to work. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is, okay, so what's the creation process? Now, as I started to do this deep dive, I really started to get into artificial intelligence. I use Google's Gemini platform, and I found it to be incredibly helpful. So I thought, but there is just so much noise right now around AI, and people have just wildly different opinions about it and other kinds of things. And so I thought what I needed to do was to explain how I really use this tool. Because to me, AI is sort of a collaborative partner. And it's been a really effective one. But I want to give you a sense, I want you to know I'm just not taking things from AI and plopping them on a screen. That's not what's going on. That's not how I'm using it. AI is not driving the presentations I do or how they do. That's still driven by me, but I am using them actively. And one of the things I'm using them for is as a collaborative research product. You know, like an assistant, I can say, here, I would like to get some information on this, and it comes back within 15 seconds. For example, we were working on some things, trying to figure out how do you calculate, how do we calculate temperature? And I said, okay, so what's this group, the World Meteorological Association? They come back with it, and I said, okay, well, how is that structured? How are they funded? Who decides who belongs to them? How do they collect data? And they came back with information in seconds. And as you look at something, you have another question, you go back and ask it again. And that's how I create a lot of these presentations. So I start on a topic down here. I find myself, well, that's kind of interesting. You know, it's going to include this, but I really need to have a separate slide that talks about this. This is really important. And that's how I use AI. And it has allowed me, I talk about having 4,000 hours of expertise. I mean, it has allowed me to close gaps in days that it took me, when I was first starting, it would take me maybe 2 weeks to get a handle on something that I now get a handle on in 15 seconds. So it's really helpful that way. And as I said before, the way I use it is a very iterative process. In fact, we did one slide for a presentation I haven't given yet. It had 4 bullet points on it, okay? And at the end of this activity area, I said, wait a minute here. I just spent 3 hours with AI creating 4 bullets. And we went back and forth so much, changed the content of bullets, put different bullets in and things like that. But it took basically of interactive time 3 hours to create 4 bullets on one side of paper. But I want to just talk about that to give you a sense of the level of interactivity that's going on here. Now, the other thing, it's just an excellent editor. Now, I happen to have dyslexia, and so typing for me and proofreading, it's just almost impossible for me. And then wordsmithing things is always fairly difficult. I'm very good at logically understanding things and fitting things together. But this is just because of my dyslexia, it's just really difficult for me. It comes back, it can do that in seconds. And it's correct, and it really just cuts down dramatically reduces the amount of time I have to spend doing those kinds of things. Then the other technique I'm using right now, and this I look at it from a quality control perspective. When I'm done creating the presentation, before we go to live recording like this, every single page of every video I'm going to do is going to be reviewed by AI first. And I wanted to review for 2 things. One for typographical kinds of things, and will it fit on the screen and those kinds of things. And then the second thing is for integrity. Is the information scientifically correct? And so that's another quality control process we want to go in. So I'm using AI fairly heavily. I really think it's been really helpful, and it's really improved the content of the videos I'm creating. And it's also making them have a lot less typos than they used to have. So hopefully, I just want to go through that though, so you're comfortable with that. And then lastly, I just want to recap this. So we talked a little bit in this video here about, some of my personal background, a little bit about the history of the Net Zero Now YouTube channel, some of the structural changes we're making, and then how I do my research now, because it's different than how it was when I initially started. If you want to contact me for some reason, I have a separate email address, so you can contact me at ron.netzeronow at gmail.com. And then the other thing you're going to see this basically at the end of every one of my videos, is that if you agree with me that we have a climate crisis and it's urgent, I'm going to ask you, what are you going to do about it? Because we're not going to solve this on a top-down basis. Our corporate political leaders are not going to lead us out of this. At least our current ones aren't. And our corporate executives of other industries aren't going to lead us out of this unless they're motivated to do that. So one of the things we need to do is we need to vote in every single election at every level of government for somebody who recognizes climate change as an absolutely critical issue and is devoted to doing something about it. And then on top of that, they have the skill set and the personality to work with people around the globe to solve the problem. And other things, if you like these videos, please subscribe. Let other people know about the video, share the link, and talk about it. And get involved in some local personal actions that make some sense. So thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you'll join us now for some other videos where we get into the content of it. And thank you for your time.